My name is Seren Walsh. I'm 28 and 3 months ago I was sitting in my parents' basement fixing cracked phone screens while they told dinner guests I was still figuring things out. Today I'm looking at a 7-figure acquisition offer for my tech repair business. But the real victory isn't the money, it's watching my family's faces as they realize the daughter they dismissed just became their biggest success story, and the worthless skills they mocked are now worth more than their combined annual salaries. The irony, they're about to learn exactly how much their constant criticism cost them. Hey everyone! Before we dive into this wild journey of family dynamics and sweet vindication, I'm curious, where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you're ready for a story about family underestimation, unexpected success, and the kind of karma that makes you believe in justice, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because this family revenge drama is about to get intense. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for the plot twist that had my entire family speechless. Growing up as the middle child in the Walsh family meant living in a perpetual state of comparison. My older brother Marcus was the golden child. Harvard MBA consulting job at McKinsey, the works. My younger sister Olivia was the creative darling art school graduate working as a graphic designer for a prestigious agency in Manhattan. Then there was me, Seren, the practical one, who chose community college over university, who preferred taking things apart to putting on appearances. My parents, Dr. Richard Walsh and Professor Linda Walsh, both academics with PhDs and tenure, never quite knew what to do with me. Dad taught economics at the local university, Mom was in the English department, and they lived in a world where intellectual pursuits meant books, theories, and advanced degrees. My fascination with electronics, my natural ability to diagnose and fix technical problems, my knack for understanding how devices worked, none of it registered as valuable in their academic bubble. Seren's just not college material, I overheard Mom telling her sister one Christmas. She's more hands-on. Maybe she'll find something in a trade school. The dismissive tone stung, but what hurt more was Dad's response. At least she'll have something to fall back on. Not everyone can be intellectually gifted like Marcus and Olivia. The constant comparisons started early and never stopped. Family dinners became report card sessions, where Marcus's latest promotion or Olivia's gallery showing dominated conversation while my achievements like building my first computer at 14 or fixing the neighbor's broken laptop for free barely earned a nod. When I announced I was starting an associate's degree in computer repair technology, Dad literally sighed and said, "Well, I suppose someone has to fix our phones." By 18, I'd internalized their message. I was the family disappointment, the one destined for mediocrity, while my siblings soared to great heights. When I moved into their basement after graduation to start my repair business, their eye rolls were audible. Playing with broken phones, Mom called it. Seren's little hobby, Dad would say when introducing me to colleagues. The basement became my sanctuary and my prison. I'd converted one corner into a proper workspace, with proper lighting, organized tool stations, and a computer setup for diagnostics. I was good at what I did, really good. Word spread through our neighborhood, then to nearby communities. People started driving an hour just for my screen repairs because I was faster, cheaper, and more reliable than the chain stores. But none of this mattered to my family. Success in their world was measured in degrees and salaries and prestige, not in satisfied customers or growing businesses. When I told them I was making decent money, Dad's response was, "That's nice, honey, but what's your long-term plan? You can't fix phones forever." The breaking point came at Marcus's engagement party 2 years ago. He'd just made partner at his firm, and the whole evening was a celebration of his achievements. When someone asked what I did for work before I could answer, Mom jumped in. "Oh, Seren fixes things. Broken electronics mostly. It's sweet how she helps people with their little problems." Little problems? That phrase echoed in my head for weeks. My work, the skills I'd spent years developing, the business I was building, the customers whose days I'd saved by recovering precious photos from damaged phones reduced to little problems. That night I made a decision. I was going to prove them wrong, not by changing who I was or pursuing their version of success, but by showing them just how valuable those little problems could become. I started researching business expansion, studying market trends, learning about scaling and investment. If they wanted to see real success, I'd give them success on a scale they couldn't ignore. The irony wasn't lost on me that the daughter they considered least likely to succeed was about to use the very skills they'd dismissed to build something bigger than any of their achievements. But I kept this plan to myself, letting them continue to underestimate me while I quietly worked toward something that would change everything. What they didn't know was that their constant criticism had given me something more valuable than their approval. The burning determination to prove that their definition of success was painfully limited, and that the worthless daughter they'd written off was about to rewrite their entire family narrative. The transformation didn't happen overnight. For months I maintained the facade of being their underachieving basement dweller while systematically expanding my operation. I started by analyzing my customer data tracking patterns in device failures, identifying the most common issues, and streamlining my repair processes. What had begun as intuitive problem-solving evolved into systematic business operations. My first major breakthrough came when I realized I could predict device failures before they happened. Customers would bring phones for screen repairs, and I'd notice early signs of battery degradation, charging port wear, or speaker issues. Instead of just fixing what they asked for, I started offering comprehensive diagnostic reports explaining what would likely break next and when. This predictive approach turned one-time customers into regular clients who trusted my expertise completely. The basement workshop expanded. I convinced my parents to let me use the entire basement, claiming I needed more space for inventory storage. They barely paid attention as I installed professional-grade equipment, microscopes for microsoldering, heat guns for component removal, ultrasonic cleaners for precision cleaning. To them, it just looked like more hobby equipment. My customer base grew exponentially through word of mouth. Local businesses started contracting me to maintain their employee devices. A nearby medical practice hired me to service their tablet systems. The local school district began sending their broken Chromebooks my way. I was handling volume that required hiring help, so I brought on 2 part-time technicians, college students, who appreciated learning real skills while earning decent money. But the real game changer came when I started analyzing failure patterns across different device types and manufacturers. I noticed that certain components failed consistently after specific usage periods, and that these failures often cascaded into more expensive problems if not addressed early. This insight led me to develop what I called preventive device maintenance plans, essentially subscription services, where customers paid monthly fees for regular checkups and priority repair services. The subscription model was revolutionary for my business. Instead of waiting for devices to break, I was proactively maintaining them, extending their lifespans, and building predictable revenue streams. Customers loved it because their devices lasted longer and performed better. I loved it because it provided steady income and allowed me to forecast business growth accurately. Within 8 months, I had over 400 active subscribers and a waiting list for new enrollments. My monthly revenue had grown from a few $100s to over $15,000. I was employing 6 people part-time and considering leasing a proper commercial space. Yet my family remained oblivious to these developments. Their ignorance wasn't accidental. I'd learned to manage information carefully. When they asked about work, I'd give vague responses like still fixing phones or staying busy. When customers called during family dinners, I'd take the calls privately. When suppliers delivered equipment, I scheduled deliveries for when my parents were at work. I'd become a master of operational stealth. The irony was delicious. While Marcus boasted about his 6-figure salary and Olivia celebrated her latest freelance projects, I was quietly building something more substantial than either of their careers. But I wanted more than financial success. I wanted vindication on a scale that would force them to reckon with their assumptions about value, intelligence, and achievement. That's when I started researching the next level technology development. My deep understanding of device failures combined with my growing database of usage patterns and failure predictions put me in a unique position to identify gaps in the market. I began developing proprietary diagnostic software that could predict device failures with unprecedented accuracy, and designing custom tools that made repairs faster and more reliable. The software development happened during late nights after my regular repair work was finished. I taught myself programming languages, studied machine learning algorithms, and built predictive models based on my extensive data collection. What started as a tool to streamline my own operations evolved into something potentially revolutionary for the entire repair industry. 3 companies reached out within a month of launching my beta testing program. Repair franchises wanted to license my software. Device manufacturers wanted to integrate my predictive capabilities into their quality assurance processes. Insurance companies wanted access to my failure prediction algorithms for policy pricing. Suddenly, I wasn't just running a local repair business, I was sitting on intellectual property that entire industries wanted to access. But I kept all of this hidden from my family. As far as they knew, I was still their underachieving daughter, fixing broken phones in their basement, living up to their low expectations, while secretly building an empire they couldn't imagine. The anticipation of their eventual realization became almost as motivating as the work itself. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday morning in October, when my phone rang with a call that would reshape not just my business, but my entire family's understanding of who I really was. The caller identified himself as David Chen, CEO of TechVault Solutions, a startup that had recently secured Series B funding for developing next-generation device longevity solutions. "Miss Walsh," he said, "I've been following your work through industry contacts, and I'm particularly interested in your predictive maintenance algorithms. Would you be available for a conversation about potential collaboration?" I nearly dropped the phone. TechVault Solutions wasn't just any startup, they were the company that had made headlines for their innovative approach to extending device lifespans through AI-driven maintenance. Their Series B round had raised $47 million, and they were being courted by major tech manufacturers worldwide. And somehow they knew about my work. The conversation that followed was surreal. David explained that word about my diagnostic software had reached their technical team through mutual contacts in the repair industry. They'd been tracking my success rates, analyzing my customer retention metrics, and studying my predictive accuracy. According to their analysis, my algorithms were outperforming anything currently available in the market by substantial margins. "What we're proposing," David continued, "is a potential acquisition of your technology and operations with you, leading our diagnostic division. We're talking about scaling your approach nationally, potentially internationally. Are you interested in exploring this opportunity? You know, there are moments in life when everything shifts so dramatically that you can actually feel your world reshaping around you. This was mine. Here I was taking this call in the same basement where my parents had dismissed my ambitions for years, and suddenly, I was discussing opportunities that would dwarf anything my successful siblings had ever achieved. If you're enjoying this journey from underestimation to vindication, hit that like button, because what happens next is going to blow your mind. And make sure you're subscribed, because this story is about to take a turn that no one in my family saw coming. The meeting was scheduled for the following week at their headquarters in Seattle. I'd never felt more nervous or more excited about anything in my life. This wasn't just a business opportunity, it was validation on a scale I'd never dared to imagine. But I still didn't tell my family. I wanted to see how far this would go before revealing the transformation that had been happening right under their noses. Preparing for the Seattle meeting required a level of professionalism I'd never needed before. I hired a business consultant to help me prepare financial projections and valuation models. I worked with a patent attorney to ensure my intellectual property was properly protected. I even bought my first business suits and practiced presenting my technology to executives who'd built billion-dollar companies. The Tech Vault offices were everything I'd imagined a successful tech company should be: sleek design, cutting-edge equipment, walls covered with patents and industry awards. David Chen turned out to be younger than I'd expected, probably mid-30s, with the kind of confident energy that comes from turning innovative ideas into successful businesses. The presentation went better than my wildest dreams. My diagnostic software didn't just impress them, it solved problems they'd been struggling with for months. My customer data revealed market insights they hadn't considered. My repair methodologies demonstrated efficiency improvements they couldn't achieve internally. By the end of the day, we weren't just discussing collaboration, we were negotiating acquisition terms. Seren David said during our final conversation, "What you've built is remarkable, not just for its technical sophistication, but for its market validation. You've proven demand, demonstrated scalability, and developed intellectual property that's genuinely revolutionary. Companies spend millions trying to achieve what you've accomplished organically." The preliminary offer was staggering: $12 million for my technology operations, an exclusive consulting agreement plus equity in Tech Vault that could be worth tens of millions more if their expansion succeeded. I was also being offered the position of Chief Diagnostic Officer, leading a team that would scale my innovations nationally. I flew home in a daze. In less than 3 years, I'd gone from being the family disappointment, fixing phones in the basement, to receiving acquisition offers that exceeded my parents' lifetime earnings. But the money wasn't what excited me most, it was the prospect of finally revealing the truth about what I'd accomplished while they were busy dismissing my potential. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. My parents had planned a family dinner for the weekend to celebrate Marcus's latest promotion and discuss Olivia's upcoming gallery exhibition. It was going to be another evening of highlighting everyone else's achievements while I sat quietly in the background. But this time, I had news that would redefine the entire family dynamic. I spent the week preparing for the revelation, not just the business details, but the emotional impact. This wasn't just about proving them wrong, it was about forcing them to confront their assumptions about intelligence, success, and value. The daughter they'd written off as not college material was about to demonstrate that their definition of achievement was embarrassingly narrow. But I also felt a strange sadness. Part of me wished they'd believed in me from the beginning, that I could share this success as validation rather than vindication. Their lack of support had motivated me, but it had also cost us years of genuine connection and mutual respect. The upcoming dinner would change everything, but I wasn't sure it would fix everything. Still, as I prepared to drop this bombshell on the family that had underestimated me for so long, I couldn't suppress the satisfaction of knowing that their disappointment daughter was about to become their most successful child, by margins they couldn't have imagined. The basement workshop they'd tolerated as a harmless hobby had become the foundation for achievements that would reshape our family's entire narrative. The family dinner started exactly as I'd expected. Mom had prepared her signature roast, the dining room was set with her good china, and the conversation immediately centered on everyone else's accomplishments. Marcus dominated the first 20 minutes, describing his promotion to senior partner, complete with details about his new corner office and 6-figure bonus. Olivia followed with updates about her gallery exhibition, showing photos of her latest installations and name-dropping collectors who'd expressed interest in her work. I sat quietly, picking at my food and letting them assume I had nothing significant to contribute. Dad asked his usual perfunctory question, "How's the repair business, Seren? Still keeping busy?" His tone carried that familiar note of polite disinterest, the way you might ask about someone's garden hobby. "It's going well," I replied neutrally. "Actually, I have some news to share." The conversation barely paused. Marcus was explaining his new responsibilities. When I tried again, I said, "I have some news about work." This time, Mom looked up with mild interest. "Oh, did you finally decide to look into getting your own place? I know the basement workshop situation can't be ideal long term." The assumption that my news would be about moving out, essentially about getting my life together enough to meet their basic expectations, was so perfectly condescending that I almost laughed. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I'd prepared. Actually, I said, placing the Tech Vault acquisition proposal on the table, I wanted to share that I've received an offer to sell my business. The word sell got their attention in a way that Fix Phones never had. Olivia glanced at the documents with curiosity. Marcus, ever the consultant, immediately started asking analytical questions. Sell to whom? For how much? What kind of business model justifies acquisition interest? I explained about Tech Vault Solutions, their Series B funding, their national expansion plans, and their interest in my diagnostic technology. As I spoke, I watched their expressions shift from polite interest to genuine surprise to something approaching confusion. The daughter who fixed little problems was describing opportunities that sounded increasingly substantial. Wait, Dad interrupted. You're saying this repair company wants to buy your… What exactly? Your customer list. No, Dad. They want to acquire my diagnostic software, my predictive algorithms, my operational methodologies, and my intellectual property portfolio. Plus, they want me to lead their national diagnostic division. The silence that followed was worth years of dismissive comments. Mom was the first to speak. I don't understand. You fix broken phones. What intellectual property could you possibly have developed? What happened next was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. I opened my laptop and began walking them through what I'd actually built over the past 3 years. Not just a repair business, a technology company with proprietary software, predictive analytics capabilities, and market insights that had attracted attention from major industry players. I showed them my customer retention rates, 94% annual retention, with an average customer lifetime value of $800. I explained my subscription model, 400+ active subscribers generating predictable monthly revenue. I demonstrated my diagnostic software, AI-driven algorithms that could predict device failures with 87% accuracy weeks before problems became apparent to users. Marcus, trained to analyze business models, started asking increasingly sophisticated questions. As I answered each one with detailed data and strategic analysis, I watched him realize that his little sister had built something more innovative and scalable than anything he'd encountered in his consulting career. You developed machine learning algorithms? Olivia asked incredulously. When, how, nights and weekends for the past 18 months, I replied. Turns out when you're handling hundreds of device repairs, you start recognizing patterns that can be systematized and predicted. But the real shock came when I revealed the acquisition terms. TechVault's initial offer is $12 million plus equity and a leadership position. The equity component could be worth significantly more if their expansion succeeds. The fork literally slipped from Dad's hand. Mom stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. Marcus began rapidly calculating numbers in his head, his consultant brain trying to process how his underachieving sister had somehow built something worth more than his entire career earnings. $12 million, Mom repeated slowly. For fixing phones. For developing technology that revolutionizes how the repair industry approaches device maintenance, I corrected. The phone repair was just the foundation for understanding failure patterns and building predictive models. The questions came rapidly after that. How long had I been planning this? Why hadn't I told them? Did I understand the implications of such a major business decision? Should I be consulting with professionals about legal and financial aspects? Each question revealed their fundamental misunderstanding of what I'd accomplished and who I'd become. They were still trying to fit this revelation into their existing framework of me as the daughter who needed guidance and supervision, rather than recognizing that I'd systematically built something extraordinary while they weren't paying attention. The legal and financial aspects are already handled, I explained. I've been working with patent attorneys for months to protect my intellectual property. I have business consultants helping with valuation models. I'm not making this decision impulsively, I'm making it from a position of strength that took years to build. The conversation continued for hours, but the dynamic had fundamentally shifted. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't the family member being talked about. I was the one being asked for advice, for insights, for explanations about business strategies and technology trends they didn't understand. As the evening wound down, I could see them processing not just the financial implications, but the larger questions my success raised about their assumptions, their definitions of intelligence and achievement, and their understanding of their past own daughter. The basement workshop they'd tolerated had been the birthplace of innovations that would reshape an entire industry. But beneath my satisfaction was a complex mixture of vindication and regret. I'd proven them wrong in the most definitive way possible, but part of me wished they'd believed in me from the beginning. Their lack of support had motivated my success, but it had also meant that my most significant achievements happened in isolation, without the family encouragement and celebration that could have made them even more meaningful. Still, as I packed up my presentation materials and prepared to leave their dinner table as a completely different person than when I'd arrived, I couldn't deny the sweet satisfaction of seeing their assumptions about intelligence, success, and family dynamics completely overturned by their disappointment daughter's quiet revolution. The weeks following my revelation were unlike anything our family had ever experienced. The carefully maintained hierarchy that had defined our relationships for decades suddenly became irrelevant, and everyone was struggling to adjust to the new reality where their assumptions about success and intelligence had been completely overturned. Marcus was the first to reach out, calling just 2 days after the dinner. His tone was different, respectful in a way that felt strange after years of subtle condescension. "Seren, I've been thinking about your acquisition offer and I have to admit, I underestimated what you've accomplished. Would you be open to discussing the business model I'm curious about, your growth strategies, and how you identified such a specific market opportunity?" The conversation that followed was the first genuine professional dialogue we'd ever had. Marcus approached my business with the analytical respect he'd give to any client asking sophisticated questions about scalability, competitive advantages, and market positioning. As I answered his questions with detailed analysis and strategic insights, I watched him realize that his little sister's business acumen rivaled anything he'd encountered in his consulting work. "You know," he said near the end of our call, "I've worked with Fortune 500 companies that have less sophisticated predictive analytics than what you've developed. How did you learn machine learning without formal training?" The question highlighted how completely they'd misunderstood my capabilities. While they were focused on credentials and institutional validation, I'd been acquiring skills through necessity, practical application, and sheer determination to prove my worth in measurable terms. Olivia's reaction was more emotional. She stopped by the house a few days later, ostensibly to see my workshop setup, but really to process what my success meant for her own self-perception. "I feel terrible," she admitted as I showed her through my operation. "All these years, I thought I was the creative one in the family, the one who turned ideas into something valuable. But what you've built is more innovative than anything I've ever imagined." Her honesty was touching, but it also revealed how our family dynamics had trapped us all in narrow definitions of intelligence and creativity. Olivia's art was genuinely beautiful and meaningful, but she'd been taught to see creativity as separate from technical innovation, to view my work as mechanical rather than imaginative. "Creativity isn't limited to galleries and exhibitions," I told her, as I demonstrated my diagnostic software. "Solving technical problems requires just as much creative thinking as any art form. I've been creating solutions to problems that didn't have solutions before." My parents' adjustment was more complex and painful to watch. Dad, the economics professor who dismissed my work as not intellectually challenging, now found himself asking detailed questions about market analysis and business modeling. Mom, who'd referred to my repairs as little problems, was struggling to reconcile her daughter's actual achievements with years of assumptions about intelligence and success. "I don't understand how we missed this," Mom confessed during a private conversation. "You were building something extraordinary right under our roof, and we treated it like a hobby." The conversation that followed was the most honest we'd ever had about family dynamics, expectations, and the damage that constant comparison can cause. Mom acknowledged that their academic focus had created blind spots about different types of intelligence and achievement. Dad admitted that his dismissive comments had been based on his own narrow understanding of what constituted valuable work. But the most profound changes weren't just in how they saw me, they were in how they began questioning their entire framework for evaluating success and intelligence. Marcus started reconsidering his own career path, wondering if his pursuit of traditional prestige had limited his potential for genuine innovation. Olivia began exploring ways to combine her artistic skills with technology applications. My parents started paying attention to different types of achievement and recognizing intelligence in forms they'd previously overlooked. The tech vault negotiations continued throughout this family upheaval, and having my family finally understand and support my work made the process more meaningful than I'd expected. When David Chen visited our city for final discussions, my parents insisted on hosting dinner at their house. The same dining room where they'd dismissed my potential for years became the setting for celebrating my achievements. Watching my father engage David in sophisticated conversation about technology, markets, and innovation strategies was surreal. The man who'd suggested I wasn't college material was now discussing my intellectual property portfolio with genuine pride and understanding. The transformation wasn't just in their perception of me, it was in their willingness to expand their definition of intelligence and success. The acquisition was finalized on a cold November morning. $12 million for my technology and operations, plus equity stakes and the position of Chief Diagnostic Officer for TechVault's national expansion. But the financial terms were secondary to the personal vindication. The daughter they'd considered least likely to succeed had built something more valuable than their combined lifetime achievements. As I signed the final documents surrounded by lawyers and executives who treated my innovations with respect and excitement, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. Years of dismissive comments and low expectations had motivated me to prove my worth in undeniable terms. The basement workshop they'd barely tolerated had become the foundation for revolutionizing an entire industry. But perhaps most importantly, my success had forced our entire family to confront their assumptions about intelligence, creativity, and achievement. The daughter who didn't fit their academic model had demonstrated that there are many ways to be smart, many ways to create value, and many definitions of success worth pursuing. The sweetest irony was that the skills they dismissed as not intellectually challenging had required more innovation, creativity, and strategic thinking than any of their traditional achievements. Their disappointment daughter had quietly become their greatest success story, and the family dynamics that had once marginalized me now celebrated the very qualities they'd previously undervalued. 6 months after signing with TechVault, I'm writing this from my corner office in Seattle, overlooking the Pacific Northwest skyline that's become my daily inspiration. The Chief Diagnostic Officer title isn't just ceremonial. I'm leading a team of 12 engineers who are scaling my innovations across North America, and our preliminary results suggest we'll exceed every projection David Chen's team made during acquisition discussions. But the real transformation isn't in my bank account or my professional title, it's in how this experience has fundamentally changed my family's understanding of intelligence, success, and the danger of underestimating potential based on narrow definitions of achievement. The ripple effects continue to surprise me. Marcus recently left his consulting firm to start his own venture, applying strategic analysis to problems he's passionate about, rather than prestigious clients who impressed our parents. Watching you build something from genuine interest and expertise made me realize I was chasing other people's definitions of success, he told me during our last conversation. Olivia has begun incorporating technology into her art installations, creating interactive pieces that combine her aesthetic sensibilities with digital innovation. Her latest exhibition features pieces that respond to viewer biometrics, creating personalized experiences that bridge the gap between creativity and technology. "You showed me that innovation doesn't have boundaries between disciplines," she explained. "My parents have perhaps changed the most dramatically. Dad has started incorporating case studies about non-traditional success paths into his economics courses, using my story as an example of how markets reward innovation, regardless of formal credentials. Mom has begun mentoring first-generation college students, helping them recognize that intelligence and potential come in many forms." The family dinners are completely different now. Instead of showcasing traditional achievements, we discuss ideas, innovations, and different approaches to creating value. The competitive dynamic has been replaced by genuine curiosity about each other's work and mutual respect for different types of intelligence and creativity. But the most satisfying moment came last month, when my parents hosted a dinner party for their academic colleagues. Instead of introducing me as the daughter who fixes things, Dad proudly explained my role at TechVault, my innovations in predictive diagnostics, and the industry recognition my work has received. Watching him beam with pride while describing technologies he'd once dismissed as not intellectually challenging was worth every dismissive comment I'd endured over the years. The basement workshop has been preserved exactly as I left it, transformed from a symbol of low expectations into a shrine to unconventional success. When neighborhood kids visit, my parents tell them about the innovations that were developed in that space, encouraging them to pursue their interests, regardless of whether those interests fit traditional definitions of intelligence or achievement. TechVault's expansion has exceeded everyone's expectations. The national rollout of my diagnostic platform has reduced device failure rates by an average of 40% across our client base, generating cost savings that run into hundreds of millions of dollars annually. Insurance companies are integrating our predictive algorithms into their policies. Manufacturers are using our failure analysis to improve product design. The little problems I solved in a basement workshop have become the foundation for systemic improvements across multiple industries. More acquisition offers have followed along with speaking invitations, industry awards, and consulting opportunities. But none of these external validations matter as much as the internal satisfaction of proving that intelligence and innovation can emerge from unexpected places when curiosity and determination are allowed to flourish. The most important lesson isn't about business success or family vindication, it's about the danger of limiting potential based on narrow assumptions about intelligence and achievement. How many innovations never happen because families, schools, or societies fail to recognize and nurture different types of talent? How many potential innovators are discouraged from pursuing their interests because those interests don't fit traditional success models? My story isn't unique in its trajectory from underestimation to achievement, but it is unusual in its complete reversal of family dynamics and assumptions. The daughter who wasn't college material became the family's greatest intellectual achievement. The work that wasn't intellectually challenging required more innovation than any traditional academic pursuit. The basement workshop that symbolized low expectations became the birthplace of industry-changing innovations. So here's my question for all of you who've followed this journey. Have you ever been underestimated by your family or society because your talents didn't fit traditional molds? Have you seen potential dismissed because it didn't look like conventional success? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Whether you're still proving doubters wrong, or you've already achieved that sweet vindication that shows everyone who underestimated you just how wrong they were. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with anyone who's ever been told they weren't smart enough, creative enough, or ambitious enough to achieve something extraordinary. Make sure you're subscribed, because I believe everyone has unique talents that deserve recognition and respect, regardless of whether those talents fit society's narrow definitions of intelligence and success. Thank you for joining me on this journey from family disappointment to industry innovation. Remember that your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to recognize your potential. Sometimes the greatest achievements come from proving that their limitations of imagination don't limit your capacity for extraordinary success. Here's to all the underdogs, the unconventional innovators, and the family black sheep who refuse to accept other people's small dreams for their lives. Keep building, keep innovating, and keep proving that intelligence and creativity come in more forms than small minds can imagine.